Hello, welcome to Pit Exchange, a podcast by Currency Research. Join us as we discuss the latest in payments, innovation, and technology with the industry's most innovative thought leaders. Today's payments are changing and moving around the world faster than ever before, and Pit Exchange gives you the knowledge and insights to keep up. Sit back and relax as we join Currency Research, exchanging ideas with today's special guest.
Welcome to another episode of the Pit Exchange, Payments, Innovation and Technology. This is an episode that's recorded in the field, so to speak. We're here in Frankfurt, in my hometown, at the Cybers conference, and we've got a great guest with us today, who I think has been in great demand here at Cybers as well. Andrew McCormack from the Nexus Payments Company. Did I get that right?
It's Nexus Global Payments, indeed.
Oh, almost right. Welcome, Andrew.
Cheers. Thank you so much, Jens. Great to be here.
And thanks for taking the time. I know Cybers is always super busy, so I really appreciate you taking this time out to have a little chat with us and talk about what's going on. But before we do that, as usual, I like to ask some semi-personal questions just to get to know the person, Andrew, a little bit better. And since we're in Frankfurt, I'll start with apple wine, the notorious local drink. Have you tried it? And if you have, what did you think?
I am embarrassed to say I have not. I should, and maybe I will try to get that done this evening. I had a few too many beverages on Monday night, so I had to sort of take it easy last night. But apple wine will be at top of my list for the next. I do not at this point have a strong opinion about it.
It's a little bit like Marmite, so either you hate it or love it is what most people say. Anyway, well, enjoy when you get a chance to do so. And then you've been, and you're going to talk about that in a little while in more detail, but you've lived in different places now, in Canada and the UAE, now you moved to Singapore. What feels like home for you?
Great question. You know, I think Canada will always feel like home for us. I mean, we've loved living abroad. I think my kids are hopefully a little smarter and have a bigger field of vision than they would have otherwise. But, you know, when we head home in the summers to see family and the familiar places that we grew up, that's always going to be home base for us, for sure. Yeah.
And whereabouts in Canada?
We grew up in the Ottawa area, right in the middle. It's the capital city, and you know we're lucky to have family cottages and summer cottages in the West Quebec area. There's lots of beautiful lakes and rivers, and it's a wonderful place to be, especially in the summer.
Yes, very nice. In the winter, it gets quite cold, I imagine.
An acquired taste, like apple wine, maybe.
Great. And finally, do you have a favorite band or musical artist or composer or something like that?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know if you know, I'm a former musician. I didn't know. Plan A was indeed to be a professional musician, which is a terrible plan, or at least a difficult plan. So I'm a big music fan. It's very, very difficult to choose one artist. But these days, actually, a band that I've been listening to a lot is called Lord Huron. They're from, I believe they're from California somewhere, but it's an American band and absolutely fantastic singer-songwriter. It's grown-up music. It's not overly aggressive, or it's rock music, but it's an amazing songwriting. So
all right.
yeah, fantastic.
Well, I'll check it out, and hopefully our listeners will do as well.
For sure.
And actually, I didn't introduce myself. I'm Jens Seidel. I'm your host for today. So let's maybe start with the professional side now. Do you want to just introduce yourself a little bit, say what you're doing now and how you got there?
Yeah, so my background is actually I did computer science, and I worked as a software engineer for about a decade out of school, and eventually found my way into payments because I actually had a small business, and I was very frustrated by the payment methods and options available to me as a small business owner. My working capital, I always like to say, was tied up in checks in the mail, right? My customers were paying me. It was an engineering company, so we're kind of larger ticket projects, and we weren't going to accept credit cards because it was just too expensive to do so. And so I became very interested, and it was about 2008. I was like, why is it so hard to get paid and to pay? And it's just genuine curiosity and a dose of frustration. And so somehow found my way into into payments and ended up becoming a chief information officer at Payments Canada, which is the entity that operates the high value payment system, the clearing system, and soon, hopefully, the real-time payment system in Canada. I left there in 2020 for an opportunity with the Bank for International Settlements to open their innovation hub in Singapore. And that was a wonderful experience, my first chance to move and live abroad. Built that team and over the course of 3 years did a number of projects, but one of them was Project Nexus, which is what I'll get to shortly. Then an opportunity came my way to build the national domestic retail payment operator in the UAE. It's now called Al Etihad Payments, and working with a former colleague of mine from Payments Canada, Jan Pilbauer, we built that company and launched instant payments in the UAE. That service is called ANI, AANI. That was 2023, 2024. And also worked on a very large project there, and a first for me was in the card space, which was the launch of the domestic card scheme. That's still kind of happening now, but it's a multi-year initiative to launch a domestic card scheme, to say the least. So that was the past 2 years, and now I'm very fortunate to be back in Singapore. I've been appointed as the CEO of Nexus Global Payments, and our mission is to take this project that was born in the Innovation Hub at the BIS from theory to practice, is what I like to say. So we have a mandate to build the platform, build the company. Our owners are the 5 central banks: Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, Philippines, and India, of course. So we've got a fantastic group of owners, very committed to the public policy objectives of lowering cost, increasing transparency and speed and access to cross-border payments. It's an infrastructure company, and I'm sure we'll talk more about
this. Yes, for sure. And I mean, at our conferences, we heard a lot about Nexus already, and there's been quite a buzz about it as well, both in Asia, but also in Africa. And I think people are really watching this closely to see how will this help with cross-border payments. But before we talk about more of the detail of how that might happen, maybe you want to give us a quick rundown of what happened so far. So just a short overview of the history of how we got to forming this new company.
Yeah. So as I said, the project itself was born from the innovation lab, and the spirit there was really kind of asking what if, or the art of the possible. There had been a bilateral connection established between FAST in Singapore, the instant payment system in Singapore, and the instant payment system in Thailand called PromptPay, and so they had successfully connected Pay Now and PromptPay, and that allowed any user of any bank in either of those countries to just open their regular bank app, choose input the phone number, in this case of the beneficiary in the other country, and just execute the payment. So it really made that cross-border payment feel a lot like the way the domestic payment systems work in those respective countries. And the users don't have to do anything. They don't have to download an app. They don't have to open a wallet. They just use their preferred app that's already on their phone, right? And so that's the elegance of the idea. Obviously, when we saw that, we were impressed by that. I was working on instant payments in Canada prior to joining the role, so I had a genuine passion and interest in instant payments. And so I thought that was a wonderful pilot project, but obviously payments are a network business, right?
Yeah.
So the power of any payment system is a function of the reach and the breadth of the network, right? It's more useful the more people you can pay or be paid from. And having a point-to-point connection is an interesting experiment, but it doesn't scale. So we thought, well, why don't we explore how to take that original idea and just truly think about what a multilateral network of networks could look like. Given that there's now over 70 countries with instant payment systems, you can see that the timing is pretty good for the critical masses there. Obviously, the devil's in the details, but let's kind of explore that from a theoretical perspective. And so the Innovation Hub, we did a series of phases in that project. I was there for the first 2 phases and led that work. We basically published it as an open source kind of project in the sense that we developed very detailed standards. Our mission was to sort of not reinvent the wheel. So we looked at ISO 20022 messaging, all the work that had been done on CBPR plus and IP plus, and just say, look, let's, to the extent possible, let's just lift and shift all of that great work, stand on the shoulders of everyone who's put that effort in, but use that suite to orchestrate messages in a way that maybe hadn't quite been done before, but would logically make sense. And so all of that was published online, and I think the transparency and the quality of the work is what helped in part garner some of that interest, which continues to this day. So long story short, I left for the UAE to take that journey, but then in the meantime, the team kept, forging ahead and was able to publish another few rounds of work, more focusing on, the rule book side of things, the governance that would be required for such an organization to succeed, really setting the groundwork for where we are now. And then, of course, the big piece was convincing the 5 central banks to actually invest, right? That's really where the rubber hits the road in terms of, you can talk all day long about great ideas inside the lab, but if someone's not willing to put their money where their mouth is, then that idea is gonna probably just stay on the shelf.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so now you've got the company set up. What are your short-term goals? What is it you want to achieve, and by when?
Probably a little ahead of my skis to say the company's set up, but I'm certainly I'm on board. We're 8 people, which is great. We certainly need to continue to scale through 2026. The main priorities are to select our technical partner. We are a scheme, but we are also going to operate a service, and so the technical build needs to be done. We're really largely giving ourselves 2026 to do that. So it's still a very ambitious timeline, but the scope is clear, and we're standing on 4 years of work. So we know exactly what the requirements are. We know exactly what we're building, and our partner that we will select very soon and hopefully announce within a few months' time, is really well briefed on what the task is to build this platform. So 2026 is very much the build year for that side. As all payment systems and arrangements, there's the technical side, and then there's the soft infrastructure side, which is the scheme rules. Those are paramount. They're super important. Some would say more important than the actual technical stuff. So the rulebook is the second big deliverable for us. We again have a working draft that has been under development for a few years, but we are now kind of really doubling down on expanding the detail and the granularity of that, working at some of the thornier issues, complexities around liability and other kind of the legal concepts that need to be enshrined in that document. And the milestone there is sort of end of Q1 2026. So we've got about 6 months to really wrap a bow around sort of version 1 of the rulebook. We want to have that published well in advance so that the participants that we would like to onboard, for the first transactions in sort of first half of 2027, a soft launch, obviously need some time to digest the rulebook. And then the last piece is the commercial model, obviously. So we do have those. Obviously, we're trying to build an arrangement that's sustainable over time. We certainly have funding to get us through a certain number of years to make this happen, but we have to have a commercial construct that makes sense, not just for ourselves, but more importantly, the incentives for the participants, right? To say, okay, what's in it for them, whether you're an instant payment system operator, whether you're an end participant, a bank, a PSP. We also have FX providers, settlement account providers, sort of in the construct. So obviously it's really important that we get those incentives right. So that's the other big deliverable on the back of the rule book.
Yeah. Okay, I understand. And I guess initially you're going to focus on those countries that you mentioned before that have helped setting this up now before you think about further geographical expansion.
Right. I think absolutely. I think at this point, it's incumbent on us to prove to the world that this isn't just a fancy idea, that it actually can and will work. And we have to do that with the first 5, we call them the first mover countries, right? So absolutely that they are the guinea pigs and the ones that help us prove this construct that can work at scale. And when I say scale, it's truly astonishing that even just those first 5 countries, we're grateful to have India in the fold, but we've got over 15% of the world's population addressable just with our starting target market. So certainly there's more than enough to work with just to prove the concept. And we have great partners. All of those countries have very advanced modern instant payment infrastructure and systems, and generally speaking, very deep adoption of those services in those countries as well. So I couldn't ask for a better place to start. That said, the name of the company was Nexus Global Payments, and that was named before I came along. So the message is clear to me that I need to make this more than just the 5, and so my job is definitely to start those early conversations with interested parties, and I'm happy to say there are certainly quite a queue of countries and central banks and instant payment system operators that are knocking on the door that we're talking to in terms of, okay, how do we move them through an evaluation process whereby both they're looking at us and we are also assessing the readiness of their systems as well, such that if we can make that match, we can get them to the next level. They may come on as owners in some cases. They may come on as actually more participants, so they're not necessarily burdened with the ownership model, which may or may not make sense for any given country. But the point is we do want to expand horizontally across as many countries as possible, but realistically, we got to get this live by 2027, and then the expansion plans would meaningfully kick in after that.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. But maybe let's stay on geographical expansion for a minute, because listening to this and hearing Nexus Global Payments, do you think that the outcome in who knows in how many years, but it's got to be that most countries in the world are going to be a Nexus member, or do you think there's maybe going to be more like regional islands that will then also interconnect with Nexus? Because you see in some regions there's already similar initiatives, they're not called Nexus, but similar initiatives where countries are being interlinked with faster payment rails.
Yeah.
What do you think might be the long-term vision there?
Yeah, it's a fair question, one that comes up. Certainly, we are working with some of the more regional providers. So, and we've already published, for example, and worked with ECB and the TIPS team for many years now, actually. So while they're not a partner today, that is something that we would certainly openly consider and welcome. It certainly makes sense for us, and it accelerates the scaling of as long as we can really iron out the details. The devil's always in the details, but where you have a regional service that can broadly bring such a huge swath of many countries, and TIPS is of course expanding itself into multi-currency and different arrangements with some of the Scandinavian countries and perhaps others. So we welcome those conversations, those opportunities, as long as we can normalize the flow and synchronize and harmonize the scheme, so that again, those two pieces that really come back to the end user experience. This service will be successful only if it provides a valuable, simple, usable experience that customers can rely on, and that the incentives are also there for the participating banks to genuinely offer this to their customers. And so as long as we can kind of get through all of that, we're happy to work with regional providers and kind of frankly simplify our lives and bring a lot of value hopefully to those networks as well. We can bring Asia to TIPS if that works, right? So I think that should be a compelling value proposition, as long as we can harmonize all the underlying pieces. So yeah, that's fine, and I don't expect that it's going to be necessarily one ring to rule them all in the future. But our mission, we're a not-for-profit entity. We have a public policy objective. We have to be a sustainable business operation, but our mission is to, and then we think that there is tremendous scope and space to improve cross-border payments, to do it in this way, and we'll be collaborative and open where we can with other regions, and if it makes sense to us directly go into a region, then we'll also do that as well. Right? We're sort of, I guess, trying to keep as many lanes open as possible.
Yeah, no, completely understand that, and it's always difficult to predict the future anyway. I think as you start this journey, I'm sure many other options will present themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say that, coming out of Sibos this week, that the payments is, every year in the past few years, if payments it's never been a more exciting time to be in payments. And I think every year we're almost outdoing ourselves at this point. So there's certainly no ability for me to predict the future, but there's a tremendous sort of, the window seems to be opening in terms of, okay, what's possible, all sorts of new things coming down the pipe, stable coins and different things. Instant payments is still evolving and scaling around the world. So who knows how all of this is going to end?
For sure. And maybe just to come back briefly on your more short-term goals and the 27 goal that you mentioned. You've already broken down for us quite a bit what needs to happen to get there. But from your perspective, are there like 2 or 3 main key things and also key stakeholders that you need to get on board for this to land as you want it to land?
Yeah, I mean, we've been very fortunate to have, come out of the BIS Innovation Hub framework. By extension, I think that's given us a lot of opportunity to work with the central banking community to show them a way to, they spend a lot of time thinking about the G20 objectives, right? Cost, transparency, speed, etc. But I think this project is really meant to be very tangible. They know, okay, we can talk about that. This is how we will do that, right? This is how we will accomplish those things. And I think that's resonated to a certain level within the central banking community. So I feel very well supported generally from that level of the system. I think where I need to focus now is rather on the commercial sector side, right? I need to spend the majority of my time that I have available from a stakeholder perspective, working with industry participants to make sure that we've got the FX providers, in the mix, to make sure we've got the settlement account providers who can provide that critical entry point into the domestic scheme, a domestic instant payment system, to have the accounts with the FX providers and make sure liquidity is available. And of course, the end user participants, making sure that the banks in these countries are embracing this service, that are willing to offer it to their customers in their channels and apps. And like all of that is really facing, I would say, the industry side as opposed to the regulator side. Obviously, the regulators are still going to be interested in some of the finer details and what we can do on sanction screening or anything in the center. But yeah, practically speaking, that's my focus right now. Is rather lots of love from my central bank stakeholders, but thank you very much. I need to spend time with the industry for the next year or two.
Sure. Yeah. No, I understand. And is it fair to say that part of the beauty of what you're doing here is that you will not really have to worry about the merchant and consumer side, because that's what the local payment schemes are already taking care of anyway?
Correct. I mean, that's the whole idea is, I've been involved in Canada and the UAE on, the initiatives to create those instant payment platforms and infrastructures and schemes. And I have a very kind of firsthand appreciation for just how much investment, time, and energy goes into building those networks, right? And making those services come to light and driving adoption and connecting all the participants. And it's usually measured in 5 to 10 years. It's, educating the consumer and managing all of that and building, even in many cases, a brand, right? In Singapore, it's called Pay Now. You don't know that as a German. It doesn't matter to you what they call the local domestic instant payment experience. In Malaysia, it's called Do It Now. And it's dominant in Malaysia, but again, you've never heard of it and you don't need to know about that. But those markets do. And so we want to basically say to each and every one of those markets, you already have solved this problem. Your customers know the brand and the experience. We're not providing a new brand. We're actually extending your brand across borders. Yes. So now your Pay Now customer can go to Thailand or Malaysia and scan a QR code, or you can send a payment without really having to know the details about how that system works. And it should be very easy. My mother or my wife or my kids should be able to do this without knowing the details, right? That's the point. So yeah, I think it's really meant to be a network of networks. It's meant to be a supporting brand. Sometimes I try to come up with analogies, but if you think about airlines, there's like the Star Alliance or whatever, and that it's, people care about their domestic carrier. Like a Singaporean has loved to travel with, Singapore Airlines, and Canadians sort of love to travel with Air Canada, but they're all part of the Star Alliance, and that actually provides a tremendous value to each of those individual companies in that alliance. And so we kind of think of ourselves as sort of that alliance-like partner for them. Yeah.
That's an interesting analogy. And it works because, again, with a Star Alliance, you also have that technology aspect of interoperability, right? They share miles, status, coins, and all of this kind of good stuff.
That's right.
Okay. Maybe, and again, you already mentioned the time at the BIS and how that has helped paving the road already for what you're doing now. But have there been some takeaways from your other roles there when you were with El Etihad Payments and when you were with Payments Canada, where you say these are some really interesting things you learned there that you intend to apply to your new role as well?
Yeah, in all cases, I'm very fortunate to be, in a position to build this company and launch this system. And I think I'm going to just take away the very hands-on practical experiences that I did doing exactly that. Certainly in the UAE, we built the company from scratch. So there's a certain amount of heavy lifting and bootstrapping that going just to make something like that happen. The launch of the instant payments scheme in the UAE was also tremendously helpful for me in terms of understanding how that pace of change can actually occur through an ecosystem, right? You have your early adopters, your pilot banks, so you need to work very closely with them to sort of get to that day zero, launch point. But then, in the UAE, we onboarded 57 more banks, and that's actually just a tremendous amount of hard work. You have to kind of really industrialize the processes around doing that so that it's as easy as possible for everyone involved to do it, because you just have to kind of rinse, wash, repeat, or do it over and over and over and over. And so thinking about those things, getting ahead of, it's not just the build, but it's the participant testing and certification environment. It's the process to get them through that lower order environments and up into the production system, and all of that needs to be as streamlined but comprehensive as possible so that the thing works when you go live. And those are just, that's the hard part, actually, to be honest. So I'm under no illusions that what we're doing is going to be easy, but at least I've done it a few times before.
Yeah, look, I can see all of that, and I'm sure this is one of the reasons why you have been chosen to do this, because it needs that hand-on practical approach. As you said before, it's nice to test something in the lab. Now the rubber needs to hit the road, and it sounds like you're ready to do that.
As they say in the Middle East, inshallah. God willing.
Well, let me also ask a slightly deliberately provocative question. Well, maybe. Here at Cybos, Swift just announced that they're going to introduce a blockchain layer to their services. And not just here, but over the last year or so. Now, there's been so much talk about stablecoins and how stablecoins are going to change everything and do everything in the future. At least some people seem to believe that. Do we even have to bother with Nexus Global Payments then?
Maybe I should just pack up and ride on into the sunset. The one thing I've learned about, payments are just a massive, you don't really want to call it a market, but if, payments are ubiquitous. Everyone everywhere needs and uses payments. The power of payments networks like Swift and MasterCard, Visa exists because they were able to hit that super scale early and just provide those tremendously valuable services to all the participants in those networks. And they don't go away overnight. So I lose zero sleep about waking up tomorrow and everything being stable coins, because I just know that even if that was ultimately meant to be, it would take a very long time to achieve that outcome. So that's my going in thesis on. Now, again, this is a massive market, right? There are indeed potentially use cases that this particular new instrument is best suited to serve, that maybe a legacy platform can't or would be difficult to achieve. Certainly, I'm not entirely sure I even know what those use cases are. I know where stablecoins are used today, and I don't think online gambling and crypto trading are necessarily important. But if that's the killer app for those stablecoins, then they can have that market, no problem, and we'll stick to our knitting. If there are more mainstream use cases, and maybe cross-border payments are part of that conversation, then I think that's a space to watch, and we will certainly keep our eyes out. We work with Swift in many ways. So we see what Nexus does. Do we think Nexus provides a unique value proposition vis-a-vis the way things work today? We think instant payments are here to stay. And the logical extension of instant payments into cross-border realm, we do believe makes sense long-term. We also, though, see it as something that, sits very distinct and separate from SWIFT. SWIFT is optimized for moving high-value, high-ticket items, right? You need large payments. If I need to send significant amount of money home, it's a SWIFT transaction, and it will be, I suspect, for a long time. It's optimized to make that happen, and the correspondent model works very well. It's not optimized today for the user experience, and that's a simple fact, right? There's banks out there that still don't even have a button on a web page to send a cross-border SWIFT wire transfer, and I may have one of those banks, in Canada, without naming names. But all that to say, certainly there is scope for SWIFT to sort of move down the stack or the feature space to provide some Nexus-like experiences, and that's something that maybe they've also considered announcing with this scheme announcement this week. So that's interesting, and again, that would be new scope for them, and I know that that will take some time and effort, but it's certainly possible, and they have a giant network, and that's something that I will watch closely. And we also really rely on SWIFT. Like even in our model, we have instant payments in 2 countries. So there's a first leg and a second leg. And we have the concept of, settlement account providers. And indeed, even though the user experience is that it's an instant payment, I can send you money, let's say in Germany, and I can, just type in your phone number, and within 60 seconds, your account is credited. There is still a bit of magic under the hood in the sense that 2 settlement account providers, one in Singapore and one in Germany, there's now an obligation that needs to be settled between those 2 parties.
Yes.
And indeed, on a wholesale basis, on a daily basis, that would happen on SWIFT. So we do see ourselves as very complementary and indeed partnering in many ways with SWIFT. We're an extension of that network in some way, shape, or form. So we're always happy to work with and continue to collaborate with SWIFT on these types of discussions. And again, we don't know what the future is going to look like, but we'll forge ahead. And whether it's stable coins or the SWIFT scheme or any number of new fintech things that come along, our ultimate goal is to help achieve those public policy objectives. If our system scales and works and provides value, then it will be long-term and sustainable. And if something better comes along and eats our lunch, then but then I guess that's the way the future evolves, and it's sort of out of my hands, but which is fine.
That's fair enough, yeah. And I think you make a fair point. SWIFT hasn't announced that it's going to switch off everything they've done so far and move to a blockchain layer. So it is an extra layer. It's not completely turning things upside down. So
yeah, and to be honest, they announced a few things this week, and one was this blockchain piece, but the other one was this concept of a scheme, and it really did focus on retail. So to be honest, that's the one that's more interesting to me in terms of how it impacts my strategic roadmap or not. The blockchain one, I don't have strong opinions about that one, to be completely honest. Yeah. It seems that the stablecoin hype right now is largely predicated on the public blockchains and the ability for financial institutions to use that infrastructure as a kind of base layer to transact, which is the new part, because previously that was not possible. I have one bee in my bonnet about that, though, which is to say everything I've ever worked on is usually highly regulated, overseen by a central bank. And one of the things that we always have to measure ourselves against as infrastructure providers, whether it's the high value system or the clearing system in Canada or the instant payment system in the UAE or now Nexus, are the principles for financial market infrastructures, right, which set these guidelines and very rigorous guidelines across the whole spectrum of what a payment system should do. And that includes the legal basis. It includes, credit and liquidity risk and all number of operational risks that must be, mitigated or at least clarified in terms of how this. And it's a tremendous amount of effort to make sure that your service complies with those PFMIs. Yeah. And I am a little surprised that nobody's asking that question vis-a-vis these blockchains. Like, I don't think you can get past chapter 1 of the PFMIs if you look at, the Ethereum blockchain. I don't know if anyone really knows who owns it, what the legal basis is for that, and how that would measure up. But that should be done. Someone should study that and say, okay, if everything else we do has to measure up against these high bar standards, have a look at that and tell me how that measures up. Maybe it does. I have no idea, but I suspect there's some gaps.
Yeah. And look, just to be clear, I think that there is a use case for stablecoins, and I think stablecoins will play a role going forward. But as you just laid out, I think it needs to be subject to the proper regulation. We need to make sure it's safe and secure. So
I think, banks have always said, we don't mind having fintech competition as long as we all have a level playing field, right? And the fintechs have always said, well, thanks but no thanks. We'd like a lighter touch. We're not a bank, and we don't introduce any systemic risk per se, blah blah blah. And so you see both sides of the argument. But at the end of the day, some minimum standards in certainly make sense. Whether you're talking about issuing stable coins or tokenized deposits, or whether you're talking about an infrastructure layer like us, like we are all one very bad cyber incident away from being shut down. And what happens when that happens? And how do you mitigate and manage those risks? How do you detect and respond to those scenarios? And we have to answer the mail on that, every year to our regulators. So someone has to answer the mail on those other infrastructures the same way.
That's only fair. Absolutely. And I'm conscious of time, but as we're talking about new technologies, everybody has been talking about AI for the last couple of years and continues to do so. How do you look at AI and what you need to and will do with Nexus now? Is it a useful tool for you? To what extent? Do you think it will also maybe change the user experience in the near future? What's your outlook on AI?
I see broadly sort of two directly applicable areas for me today, which is, I'm building a company, and I do have to be lean and mean, and I don't, it's going to take some number of years before we get to a revenue steady state model. So AI is a tremendous way to enhance the team that you have, the capabilities you have. If you need to, like, these are simple things, but like I need to write a travel and expense policy for my new company. Like previously that might have taken me like a week or two to, get some samples and sit down and bang it out. I can now basically have a draft one in 15 seconds. And that's tremendously valuable for me. It's not a contentious thing. It's a travel and expense policy. They're all basically the same. Just you set your per diems and your policies and your flight limits and you're done, right? So that there's a very practical use of AI when you're building a company, which is tremendous. And I think we can accelerate and really manage our cost structure a little bit more intelligently as a result of that. But that's not a very interesting answer. The more interesting kind of functional space is around the fraud capabilities. So most payment networks do have some fraud analytic capabilities. The liability and the responsibility for catching fraud is always with the participants, but the network sees more than any one given participant, right? So it's incumbent on us to provide as intelligent, real-time, basically alerts and triggers for the participants to consume. And how you do that these days, I think more and more is about having a sophisticated model. It used to be very rules-based, so in the cards world, if the same debit card is used more than 6 times at the same location within 2 hours, then trigger an alert, or very hard-coded rules, whereas the new models are significantly more adaptable, and those are based on kind of trained, reinforced learning type models that should provide much better signals to the participants to say, whoa, we got to stop this payment or not even allow it to happen.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I would have thought, even before that, you were mentioning having to create the rule book and then test all your participants against the rule book. I guess there's also a role for automated testing.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, though, testing with respect to a participant is really ensuring that their software build and their implementation meets your specs. And certainly the AI tools could maybe help you analyze that and expedite that a bit. But thus far in my experience, it's that one is very much just a very methodical step-by-step pass-fail. You either can or you can't achieve this test case. And if you can't, then, go fix it and come back. So it might be there is some energy on AI ops, which is interesting to say, okay, in a payments network, there's always some participant who's having some trouble. A bank goes down, a network link goes down. And the more intelligence you have monitoring those things, the quicker you can respond and mitigate those things. And so there's certainly a lot of interesting stuff happening in that sphere as well. But that's way beyond payments. That's any large network operation center should have some of that capabilities now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great. Anyway, I think we're running out of time. Hopefully the queues will be much shorter now when we go over to the exhibition to get in. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope we will continue this dialogue. I'm grateful that you're going to join us in Istanbul next year in March for the Central Bank Payment Conference. So we're definitely going to get an update then after, the first 6 months since we've recorded this.
Yeah, that should be wonderful. Turkey is obviously one of my favorite places to go. So thank you for organizing the conference in Turkey, which is great. And then separately, 6 months would be a good kind of milestone checkpoint to kind of give the audience, I think, hopefully some meaningful progress against everything I've just described.
Sounds good. Yeah. Andrew, thank you so much. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
All right. And that is another episode of the PIT Exchange. Thank you all for listening in today. Please do follow, do whatever you need to make sure that you get the next episode as well on your podcast platform. And thank you all. Have a good one.
Thank you for listening to the PIT Exchange, a podcast by Currency Research. Check out our upcoming events and publications at currencyresearch.com. And join us for our next episode to hear what's trending in payments, innovation, and technology.